You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. I am Sherry Lip, the marketing manager at Stimulus Technologies, and I am here with Nathan Whittacre, the CEO of Stimulus Technologies, and we are going to be talking about broadband and the future of broadband, and specifically BEAD funding. So welcome, Nathan. You are an expert on this topic, so I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it too, because it's been a lot of my life over the last 6 months. So we've been investing a lot of time and energy into this.
Yeah, so are you ready to share it with everybody? So first of all, BEAD funding, that's BEAD, an acronym. So can you talk about what that is, what it stands for?
So BEAD stands for Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. It was part of the infrastructure bill that President Biden signed in November 2021. That infrastructure bill was designed to build out roads and highways and lots of different infrastructure across the United States. And about $42 billion was allocated to build out fiber optic or high-speed internet networks to rural or underserved areas. So it's been in process for about 3 years now in preparation and planning. And there's been some questions around why hasn't any of it been deployed yet. It's been a difficult process because they first had to identify areas that were either unserved or underserved. And unserved or underserved definition has changed a little bit over time. What they're saying is any building in the United States that does not have at least 25 megabits per second of internet service, of download internet service, is considered unserved. So they don't get any service. And then underserved is anything under 100 megabits per second. Those definitions have changed a lot over time. It wasn't that long ago that 100 megabits per second was probably the most you could get at your home or business. But now it's considered anything under that is underserved, and you can't, do everything you want on the internet with those type of speeds today. So what they had to do is spend about 3 years developing a lot of maps and identify all the locations in the United States, and then ask every internet service provider, including Stimulus Technologies, of who we offer service to and how fast our services are. After we submitted our maps and information, there was a challenge opportunity for businesses and residents to say, I can't get that kind of speed. I've made a request to, your local cable provider or local internet provider, and they can't provide me service. So that went through a couple of challenge processes. And now we're to the point that where the internet service providers have the locations that need to be served, and the money is getting ready to be spent. And so it's been an arduous process that taken a lot of investment from federal and state and local governments, internet service providers, communities, individuals to get to this point that they're actually going to be starting to provide money for broadband infrastructure.
And does this apply to both residential people and businesses?
The focus is on residential. They're trying to provide service to homes, but most homes are located in communities where there are, commercial buildings too. So in the end, it's every building in the United States and Puerto Rico and other areas that do not have access to high-speed internet service. And so the goal is really to get service out to mostly rural communities, because large urban areas have a lot of options. There's a lot of competition because the big providers that build out these type of services can get a quick return on investment if they do a fiber build out in a large city like Los Angeles or New York City or Las Vegas or someplace like that. But deploying internet service in a community of 1,000 people there's very little return on investment for these big providers, so they don't end up building out in those areas. So most of this money is going to go to rural areas that have traditionally not had access to high-speed internet.
And why is equity is in this title? So how does that affect what is so essential about this project?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what I just said is if I live in, like for example, Stimulus Technologies serves Lone Pine, California. It's a community in the Eastern Sierra, California of about 2,500 people. If I live in Lone Pine, California, do I have the same access to education, online education resources, telemedicine, work opportunities for remote work, all these things that require high speed internet access as somebody that lives in Los Angeles does? And so that's the equity is leveling the playing field that wherever you live, you have the same access and opportunities to gain education, to get the right job, to access telehealth, to get access to doctors across the country, and the entertainment and everything that comes with it too. So that's the equity part of it is leveling the playing field for every person inside the United States to have the same access no matter where you live, urban, suburban, or rural.
And what are the challenges of getting internet? Obviously the government has had to step in to help businesses provide this. What are the challenges in getting internet to the rural areas?
So that's the biggest problem that I mentioned before is a small community doesn't provide a good return on investment to a large company. But on top of that, it's very difficult to get this infrastructure built out into areas that are less densely populated or very remote. So again, I'll give you the example of Lone Pine, California. Inyo County, where it lies, covers a huge area. I mean, Inyo County, California, is I think bigger than the state of Rhode Island, but has less than 100,000 people in population. So very big geographic area, and there are obviously people that live there, residents that live there, but they're in small pockets or they are very dispersed. And then you have areas like Death Valley lies in Inyo County. And to get into Death Valley, which is the lowest point in the United States, you have to go over two mountain ranges in either direction. So to build out fiber optic infrastructure into an area like Death Valley is extremely costly because you have to, bore out mountaintops or lay poles across mountain ranges. And so it's very costly and expensive to do that. And so again, providers in the past have not been willing to build that type of infrastructure out because it's extremely high cost, but very little return. And so without state and federal grant funding or any type of funding, these projects would never get built out. And that's the goal of this program, is to have a pretty large investment to build this infrastructure out. It kind of reminds me, in the 1950s of the Eisenhower administration building out the freeways in the United States, is interconnecting these communities and cities that were difficult to interconnect in the past. And so a lot of freeways were built out because of those programs that were done in the 50s. And I think the same thing's happening today, that we're finally integrating these rural areas into the internet age through this high speed connectivity that we're building out. And the goal of the BEAD program is a fiber optic first goal. So applications for the grant process that are all fiber optic build outs have the highest priority. Now they have options of funding things like fixed wireless or cable or low Earth orbit satellite, but those have lower priority and are going to get either less money or if there's no other fiber optic option to get into those areas, they will get funding, hopefully through some other type of technology. But this whole program is fiber optic first. The question is $42 billion enough to build fiber to all these communities? The answer is also no. It's probably the rough estimates are somewhere around $200 to $500 billion to get every home and building in the United States built with fiber optic cables. And there's some areas that don't make any sense at all. Somebody's hunting cabin at the top of a mountain doesn't really need fiber because there's probably no electricity there anyways. So more than likely, those type of buildings are going to end up being served by something like low Earth orbit satellite, like Starlink, that gets a lot of press out there from Elon Musk. There's great opportunity to serve those with other types of technology, but in small communities, where there's a few thousand homes or even a few hundred homes, fiber optic is really the priority to build out into those areas.
What makes fiber the more desirable option over any of the other types of broadband?
So fiber has a long life cycle to it. So it's unlike low Earth orbit or fixed wireless or older technologies like cable modem or DSL. Um, Fiber optic has the ability, once it's laid, to be upgraded over and over again. So there's constantly improving technologies to improve bandwidth with fiber optic cable. So it's really the best technology that we have to deliver data connectivity from location to location. And I would expect a fiber optic cable that's laid today in the ground would serve as an area for 50 plus years. Um, so today, if we lay fiber to a community, we might be delivering 1 gigabit service or maybe 10 gigabit service. But in a few years down the road, as technology improves, just switching out electrical components. So, the equipment of the customers, location, and then an equipment at our pop site or where we deliver service from, we might be able to upgrade that to 100 gig or a terabit per second, in the future. So that fiber optic cable can serve much higher speeds without a significant reinvestment to that infrastructure, and that's why fiber is the priority, is because it's upgradable, whereas lower satellites, for example, have to be replaced every few years. They have a lifespan, and then there's a physics issue with them that they're using radio frequencies, and there's a limit to how much data we can push over these radio frequencies, and then they're more susceptible to weather and other issues. So that's fiber is the priority. There's other technologies that are okay, that are good. I mean, we're a fixed wireless provider. So we provide currently a lot of wireless connectivity, but there is a limit to that. And if I want to increase the capacity of our wireless network, we have to change out a lot more equipment to do that. And then there's still some physical limits to how much bandwidth we're able to push to customers, even with fixed wireless. It's increased over the years, but it isn't as easy to increase that it is over a fiber optic connection.
And let's talk a little bit about Stimulus's interest in this, because we talk on this podcast a lot about our IT services and cybersecurity, but we are in the internet business too. So how did Stimulus get involved with all of this?
So about half of our business is internet services. So we are an internet service provider in 5 states. We serve mostly rural communities, and we have done it for almost 25 years. We currently operate these networks that serve thousands of homes and businesses, and mostly through fixed wireless. And so our involvement in this is really to provide better service into these communities that have historically only been able to be provided by options like cable modem or fixed wireless because of the remoteness of the areas. And so we hope to, and our goal is to use federal grant funding to build out fiber optic services into communities where we currently serve and in surrounding areas where we could serve. And so it's really an upgrade to our existing network and expansion to areas where that are contiguous to our existing network. So we're currently working on bidding on a lot of these, and we're excited for the opportunity to continue to serve our clients through higher speed connections.
And what are the challenges, as you've been working through this process for so long now, and mapping out those areas where it's needed the most as opposed to where it might not be?
Yeah, that's the tough part is, every state has been administering their own state program. So every state has a different program, different timelines, and different application process. So that's been a difficult thing for us is to understand not just the federal government's requirements through the NTIA, who's administering this, but also every state's requirements, which vary a little bit, and their platforms. And then each state is taking a little bit different approach to how they're mapping out these areas because one of the requirements of BEAD is in an area that the state defines as a service area, the applicant has to provide service to 100% of the locations that are either unserved or underserved in that area. So they may have, like, state of Nevada is very rural. We have Las Vegas, we have Reno, but outside of Las Vegas and Reno, there's about 90% of the area of the state, physical area, but less than 10% of the population. It's pretty dramatic, yeah, the state of Nevada. Uh, and there's very few states that are like that. I mean, there are a few other states, especially out west, that are in that same ballpark, but state of Nevada is very unique. And so, some of these areas might have, one location that's up a mountain road, and it's very difficult to deliver service to that one location. And so that's one of the things that we've had to look at is, what areas make the most sense for us to connect with fiber? Can we incorporate a hybrid solution with our existing fixed wireless network and fiber optics? Or is it best that that area is just served with low Earth orbit satellite or some other type of technology? And we bid as a company on over 50 areas in the state of Nevada, and each one of those required a significant amount of effort of engineering and design, business planning, finance planning, and it was a pretty onerous process for a small company like ours to do that. And that's one of the biggest hurdles to this grant program. Any grant program that, if you've ever applied for one, there's a lot of hurdles, and it's a long process to get through. So we've been working on it for a while. We've had some consulting firms that have helped us both on the grant proposals and the engineering process. And now, applications have been submitted, and we're working through, hopefully winning a lot of these areas so we can service them. But it's a lot of the give and take and decisions we've had to make along the way. And unfortunately, I think some areas are just not going to get funded because, again, they're too rural for a fiber optic service. So we'll see how it lands, but it's going to be interesting over the next 6 months or so as these announcements come out.
And do you think people will be surprised? Do you have any idea of approximately how many people or percentage of people in the country are without internet? Because we kind of think of it as being just an everyday part of our life.
Yeah, when you think about it, especially those that are in urban areas, in cities or suburban areas, we just take it for granted, and people get upset. Oh, my internet's out for 15 minutes. I can't do anything. Uh, but in rural areas, even getting 5 meg of service is a great thing. At a lower cost. I mean, you can get the satellite service, but you're talking about $150 a month, $130 to $150 a month is pretty expensive for a retired family or maybe a new family or an individual. Some of these options are very expensive. So to get low cost and high speed connectivity in, again, about 10 to 20% of the country is difficult. So it is, I think people just take it for granted, think cell service is everywhere and internet is everywhere. And there's still a large portion of the country that doesn't even have, 4G cell service or, over 10 meg internet service. So there's, it's an interesting thing when you start getting out into these rural communities.
Yes, certainly when I think of Wyoming and Montana, which I've driven through, and some parts of the Midwest where it's very, very long distances between very small towns,
Yeah.
communities. So one last question: if somebody, and mostly likely listening to this podcast, maybe knows somebody who is needing internet, as time goes on, and then this starts to roll out, so where can people find information?
The state broadband office in every state is putting out a lot of information. And one of the things that every state that we're working with is doing is a lot of community outreach. So if you are interested from a community standpoint, get involved with your local community, talk to your local chamber of commerce or your township, your mayor, whatever it may be, and make sure that you're getting involved with the funding process with your state broadband office. And there'll be potentially a couple of rounds of this over the next year. But that communication with the state broadband office, they often are holding monthly webinars or even town hall meetings in person. I think that involvement is really important to make sure that you as a community are represented. And then there'll be a challenge process over this next year too, as the grants are given, that maybe your home is not even on the maps. They're saying that you're served, make sure that you're, and you don't have any options, make sure you're challenging those to ensure that every house that's supposed to get service is getting service from a grant standpoint. So, get involved. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of communication that's coming out from the state broadband offices, and get on those mailing lists and find out when the next opportunity to get involved is. It's a great opportunity to ensure that your community is getting the service that, again, that equity word that everybody should have in the country.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Nathan. This is a very interesting topic. It's always exciting when new stuff is happening and getting people connected. So thank you, and thanks everybody for listening.